Good afternoon and welcome to the June 24, 2014 meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. Reminder that this meeting is being recorded, and I will also mention that Mr. Rafter, the airport manager, is out of town at family events in New Jersey this week, or this weekend, so he is not here. I will be giving his report as it was delivered to me. As far as the agenda goes, one change, we are not going to we have to have an executive session for the purpose of reviewing the minutes, but we are not going to be involved with item B for reasons I will explain when we get to the non-union salary increase discussion. Other than that, are there any objections to the agenda? Hearing none, it is adopted as modified. We don't have minutes yet for May 27th. We have the warrant of June 18th, 2014 to ratify. Is there a motion to?
So moved.
Second.
Jamie, if any time you don't get anything, let us know. And Jamie's doing the minutes. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. And approval of the June 25th warrant.
Move approval of the June 25th warrant.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed?
have a question. I was not here, so I
You
did
can
not
either
sign
vote or
it.
abstain, as you wish.
Okay. I will abstain.
All right, it's 4 ayes and 1 abstention. Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on to pending leases and contracts. You have a list in your packet. The first is the reimbursable agreement with the FAA for the contract for design and construction support for the modernization of the air traffic control tower. Are there any questions or comments on that? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Planzer moves to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Gasparo seconds. Further comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. The contract and associated notice to proceed with Jacobs Engineering for the design and construction bid documents for the air traffic control tower for $617,000 and $963. That's reimbursable by the FAA.
Move approval of the contract with Jacobs.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Planzer seconds. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
The contract amendment, this is for computer assistance services, and this is to increase the amount of the contract for the current fiscal year, which ends June 30th, by $10,000, because you may remember last meeting there was some discussion about updating the website and so forth, and that there was no money available. Well, it turned out he had also gone slightly over the, I believe it's $60,000 amount for the year already with his May invoice. And I am assured that this $10,000 increase will take care of the rest of that and his June work.
One question. That's not the Lamb and Burke, whatever we've had.
Burke and Lamb, no, this is the computer, this is
Another one.
the
Okay,
man,
thank you.
and I'm trying to think of his name.
Skylar.
Thank you, who does all the computer
Thank you.
tech work for us.
Skylar Coon.
Skylar Coon, right.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract amendment with Computer Assistance Services.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous, thank you. Beach license agreement with Sales Seafood for a beach license fee of $1,500. That's revenue for beach catered events at the Nobody Air Beach. And this is something that's been going on for quite a few years. Is there a motion to approve?
I make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The next two have been withdrawn, Ms. Beiser and Pirate Pops. And it's interesting, we will have no food or drink at the Belvedere Beach this year. The two food trucks that were there last year have not renewed. I know one of them is practically occupied full-time at the brewery.
Right.
And I don't know about the other, but they did not come forward. The one that we would have liked to have had back is the one that I'm sure is spending all of its time at the brewery. So whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but anyway, there will not be food service down of any kind at the beach this summer as of now. We have three contracts now ready to go with World Fuel Services. Unfortunately, this is an 11th hour thing. You have the basic form of the agreement in your package. That last issue was the indemnification clause, which they were working back and forth on. And the last sentence, I think, to be put in at our council's request was something that the indemnification provision was, as far as the customer, that being the airport, was concerned, is subject to local law. And with that, everybody seems to be on board. Since you've seen the agreement, except for that provision, the agreements, if you would be willing to approve them without seeing the final and authorize me and Mr. Gasparo to sign them, I think that would be good. If not, we will have to vote to extend the contract and deal with it at the next meeting. What is the pleasure of the board?
I have no problem.
No.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll
Mr.
second.
Bender. Thank you, Mrs. Topham.
One question on,
Yes.
and so that language, just to be clear, has all been run through our
Oh,
council,
yeah.
and
I
it's
mean,
all,
the holdup,
the final is-
frankly, has been with our council,
Very good.
getting it back.
just to be clear.
yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, they've held it up a little bit on their end, too, but it's been mostly on our end. But, yes, as the council is satisfied with it, as I understand it. Is there anything, other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No? None? So carried unanimously. All right, good. I'm glad that's out of the way.
Yeah,
It's
nice
been-
to have that one done.
It's
Rolling
it's been
it
a
over,
long haul. All right. Now, the next item is the memorandum of understanding, and there is nothing new on that. According to Mr. Rafter, except that a meeting has been set with town council to discuss the limit for contracting, to have the contract rule limit of 10,000 applied townwide or by department. I think Tom mentioned this the last time, that there is a $10,000 limit per vendor, and the question is, does it apply to essentially, does it apply to the enterprise funds along with the town, or is it just the town and the enterprise funds separately?
So just out of education, nothing in the law changed. This is just a different interpretation of it?
That's correct.
And how long have we been doing it the other way?
As long as I know, as long as I've been involved. I'm
Seems a
sure-
little odd to put such a restriction.
Well, there were a whole, town council changed about 2 years ago. And a lot of things changed as a result of, interpretations changed. I won't say a lot, but several interpretations changed with the advent of the new town council. And I think this is one thing that they may not have focused on up till now. In fact, one of the things that was in place was that you could not have any spending above $5,000 without a contract. And this, at least, they finally saw the wisdom of letting it be 10, just because it was so little at 5. And the law did allow that, but now this question has come up about the departments. And so, anyway, we'll see what comes out of that meeting. As far as the formerly used defense site issue, Mr. Rafter said this morning that he still had not heard from the Army Corps of Engineers, and he has not contacted them recently, and will do so when he gets back on Thursday.
Just for the record, I think at some point, we have a citizen who wants to do this kind of hanging out there. So we should encourage Tom to draw this to a conclusion, so that, because they don't know what, otherwise they say, do we get, we'll spend our own money, and we're saying to them, you can't, at least we're not sure if you can. And it seems to me that we're creating an issue. Let's try to solve it. Either tell them absolutely not, and this is why, or let them go do that, and let's move on with it. It's been dragging out now for 3 or 4 months.
Actually, I think we know that it's okay that they go, but we don't have the official letter, like.
Yeah, and town council's not going to opine on it until we have the final letter. So it's the question of seeing what we can do to get the Army Corps to.
Yeah, so let me reiterate my point. We need to encourage Tom to bring this to closure. Just going by what the chairman said, that he hasn't called recently.
Yeah, I don't know how long, but certainly not in the last week, or not since the last meeting, I don't believe.
think we should at least try to draw it to conclusion.
Okay, fair. I will, everybody agreed to that?
Yeah, certainly.
I pass it on. The next item for approval is the FAA grant award for the $573,500 for the ARF vehicle.
Do you need a motion for that?
I do need a motion.
I will
for
make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Ms. Planter seconds. Any discussion or comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Did I hear you say aye, Mr. Caspar?
Yes.
Do you have that for signing tonight, Jamie, or not?
I believe so.
Okay.
Oh, unless that's what just came
No, this has been here for a while. Well, we'll check afterwards.
in. Okay, yeah.
On the master plan and sustainability program, there was an update which I asked Janine to send out to everybody today. I don't know if she did or not.
Yeah, she
I
did.
didn't see it. And also, there was a letter that's in the packet that Tom sent to Mr. David Chamberlain at Jacobs, expressing his concern about the status of things. I don't believe he's had a response to that letter directly, but he's still concerned that Bill Richardson doesn't quite get it. To quote him. So he's going to keep working on that. The GA building PCO update. You have in your packet a list of all the PCOs which have been approved to date. And Mr. Cohen, when you just were talking about your client, so why don't we save you a little time, if it's all right with everybody. I had asked, I just reported that Tom Rafter's away on personal business, but I had asked him this morning if he'd heard anything from the Army Corps of Engineers. He said he had not. I asked him if he had called. He said he had not called recently. And it is the consensus of the commission to get him to bring it to closure.
Okay.
So,
I think that's what we'd all like.
Yeah.
You know, if there's a path.
if you're going to speak, you have to get up to the microphone, please.
If there's
Would
a-
you state your name?
Sure,
And
Stephen
why you're
Cohen.
here? Who are you representing?
Stephen Cohen for Jeff Smith and on the lease area. If there's a path to yes, we'd like to get there. If there's some impediment, we'd just like to resolve it. And I think that, we just have the unsurety is tough at the moment. But
We understand, as I said, town council isn't going, since unfortunately the email we received said it was not the final word,
yeah,
town council isn't going to opine on our options until we get that.
yeah,
the final word.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your efforts, and I look forward to hearing from the board or the commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You didn't expect to be able to get out of here in 2 minutes, did you? All right. So you have the list of PCOs. There's one more to be approved for $12,611.59, reduced from $14,111.59. And it was reduced by that amount because we removed the fence, the gates and posts, rather than the contractor doing it, from the old gates and posts from the front there. So I should say, before we get into a discussion and vote on that, there are at least 7 sort of outstanding, in the sense that 5 have been rejected, so are noted at the bottom and is in contention, and the other 2 are still under review by Nantucket Architecture Group. So the only thing that is pending is PCO 27. What is your pleasure? Is there any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve PCO 27,
In the reduced amount of
$12,611.59.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Just a comment.
Yes,
I
sir.
would just say that this is the first time we've seen this site layout and grading plan ourselves. I had never seen this before. I noticed there are some differences. We didn't actually put the parking the way that is on this plan. And as well, I just noticed that the finished job, there's puddles in front of the building and a brand-new paving job. We had a grading plan. I know that the whole building has had its difficulties, but I, find that to be troubling. I'm still going to vote for the change order, but I just thought that since we finally saw this, if we had a...
I actually noticed those puddles some time ago myself.
Yeah.
And also, there's some real issues with water draining off the building.
Right.
Both into the parking lot and into the areas right around the building that are going to have to be, those are not necessarily the contractor's fault, but this is something that
Yeah.
they should address, in my view. I would actually think maybe we would want to make it tentative, subject to a review of whether they have any obligation to
Well, I don't think that this PCO impacts that, as I understand it, because this is only for the ramp and the granite curbing. So that's why I was willing to vote for it.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
It didn't, at this point,
All right.
that part of the pavement's done. I don't know what Tom, and I think that that's probably going to lead to a dispute between the paver and this plan work. So was it was it Jacobs and this grading plan, or is it the contractor that didn't follow the grades?
I can't
It's
even
pretty
read it.
tough to tell.
It's very small reading.
Yeah.
I can't read it. I'm just wondering if this is the original grading plan that Jacobs did, or is
The last date that it was revised, when I looked at it, I think was June of 13. Yeah.
So that's the one that was in dispute,
Right.
that they put in dispute, and basically told them to do it. So the question is whether they followed it.
Right. Maybe it's something Tom can look
Yeah,
into for us.
we'll check on that. Okay. You made a motion, was there a second?
I second
Mrs.
it.
Topham, second. Are there any other comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve? There is a motion to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. All right, discussion of non-union salary increases for fiscal year 15. The town's program is 2% for its non-union employees, and I would propose that we adopt the same schedule. Is there discussion? Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Should we have any discussion?
No, you can.
May? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not
I-
opposed, I'm just
No, I
wondering.
did ask for discussion before,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought.
Oh, I just thought if we had a motion
fine.
first
Yeah,
and a
that's
second,
fine.
it would be appropriate.
Right.
Just, obviously, just having the blanket 2% doesn't take into account any kind of performance or review type of a system. Is there any thought that we should be giving into?
I think Mr. Rafter has instigated a performance review system. If he hasn't, he's planning to. But I was going to bring this up when we got to commissioners' concerns, but I will bring it up now. One of the issues that I raised with Ms. Gibson was Mr. Rafter's compensation. Because when he was hired, and you may remember this, Arthur, when he was hired, he forewent the health insurance, which was a value of about $18,000 at the time, and asked if he could take that as salary instead. I had a discussion with him at the time, and I said, I thought we should give him, and I think the commission agreed to this, give him 10 of the 18.
Right.
And hold the rest back, sort of, as a performance incentive. I have had, shall we say, desultory discussions with Libby, Ms. Gibson, 2 or 3 times during the course of the 2 years about the whole idea of performance bonuses and so forth. And she does not like the idea. She does not like the idea of merit. And there was, as for the benefit of those who were not here at the time, one of the issues at the airport was that some employees were given bonuses, although how scientific that process was is up to question. But nonetheless, it was done, and it caused a ruckus, I think, as much because they're called bonuses as anything else. The water company for years has had a $20,000, quote, merit increase line in its budget. And I've never heard anybody complain about that. But it's the same thing. It's semantics. I think they have a reasoned process at the water company of how they award that money. But in any event, when I asked Ms. Gibson about the non-union salary increases, I also asked her about, I also brought up the subject of Tom's increase. And I reminded her of this money that was sitting out there. And her reaction back, I proposed actually, obviously this would be subject to everybody's approval, but I said basically, if we gave him 7 more and gave him a 2% increase, that would be about $150,000. Her reaction was that nobody was getting a raise, anything like that, in the town, and that there were 24 other people in the town who were not town employees who were not taking town health insurance. And while she didn't say no, the message was clearly that she would not favor or appreciate our doing this. Now, there's another piece to this which is important, because I think we all need to understand the context for it, which is 2 weeks ago at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, they sat with a compensation consultant who is trying to put a compensation plan in, and he will be visiting with us at the next commission meeting in July, because his services were included in the contract, for us, for the enterprise funds, were included in the contract that the town signed with him. And what he is doing is developing a process which I saw in the private sector 30 years ago, where each job is fit into a salary range, and there is, a high and a low and a median sort of in the range, and your increases are in part governed by where you are in the range, the size of your increases. If you're closer to the top of the range, the increases are small. I don't know if Boeing has a plan like that or not. I would suspect they do at some levels. It works pretty well. But then, of course, while this was unsaid at the selectmen's meeting, such a program would essentially only apply to non-union employees, because the others are all governed by the contracts. But at least it would help the town in deciding where a particular position fit in the scheme of things. Anyway, one of the things that he is going to do is going to set salary ranges for, as I say, for these various positions for us, as well as if we're agreeable to this. And Tom has already gotten him to agree that he has to look beyond Massachusetts for comparables for this, for the airport manager job. And so I did a little rump survey online to see what I could find, and I looked specifically at Aspen and Vail, Colorado, which are both seasonal airports. And as best I could determine, and I don't know, one of the problems is I don't know how current that date is, that in both cases the salary is about $132,000. I also found Mr. Barolt's contract, the manager at Hyannis. I found his contract online. By the way, he has a contract, and we've been told we can't. And his salary, the year the contract was signed, which I think was 2011, was $102,000. So now I presume, I have no idea whether any of those people take, the full town benefits. So I think it's a topic, this is a topic we have to discuss in public. And so I'm bringing it up to see whether there's a sense amongst the commission that we should proceed, because I think Tom needs to know definitely one way or the other whether this is ever going to happen. And so I think we need to talk about it and think about it and come to a conclusion.
One question. Tom does not get any housing stipend, does he? Which many higher employed will say.
I don't believe they do.
They say they do. And that's one of the things when I was on that compensation, was trying to figure that out.
That we'll have to figure out, because I don't believe the police chief, it's certainly not included in any numbers in the town report, which I would think it would have to be.
Well, I don't know. We had it previously with the previous airport.
Yeah, well, and there was a big stink about
yes,
that.
But there were others that were getting, to the best of my knowledge, like the maybe not, but this is hearsay, the superintendent of the schools and the police chief. They've always thought that. Now, maybe it's not true, but that's been the talk around town. Mm-hmm. So it would be interesting to find that out.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
I think.
We can certainly do that.
And,
so you've got three different points here. One is the 2% raise for non-salary increases.
Right.
A couple questions on that. What's the non-union, what's the union increase going to be?
It's about the same.
About the same, so that's okay. I assumed, and I'm not familiar with the compensation the city uses.
The subject to the fact that there's no contracts with the union yet, so how that all plays out remains to be seen.
So normally, there are two components that go into a salary for most companies, and you touched on it. One says you're in a salary band, and that for performance or longevity, you get an increase in that salary within the band. And there's another one that says, for compensation based usually upon, not always, but usually upon inflation, you'll get an increase to allow the bands to continue to move up with the inflation rate. It was my assumption that the 2% was that inflation band, and that there is another way compensation on performance is given by the supervisor through the band. And I could be wrong, but I can't imagine that we only have one salary and the person has to go to a boss and say, I'd like another $50 or I'm leaving. So there's got to be a band within the compensation.
There is not, to my knowledge, at the present time.
So how was the airport manager's compensation determined?
Well, it was determined, as I told you, the original salary that we offered was $130,000. But we raised it to $140 because he wasn't taking the.
Right, but I wondered where the 130 came from.
That was basically something that we agreed with the headhunter, who thought it was an appropriate salary, and it was about what the old manager was making.
Without the old manager, without all the
Without the,
nonsense.
well, without the housing allowance, per se.
36,000.
So if our compensation manager,
And incidentally, that was, of course, very public. Excuse me for interrupting, but that 36,000 was very public, and people who were interviewing for the job said, well, where's that in the package?
well, I think they would. I think he, not only was there a housing allowance, I think he got free hangar space and some other.
Yeah, but that wasn't publicly known at that point.
Well, it may have been wrong. That wasn't public. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
so that was all part of the compensation
Right.
package. So when we look at the salary for this airport, I'm familiar with the two airports you mentioned. They are seasonal, but they're not like this airport at all. They're
right.
single runway in and out operations. They're very low density. And the airports are, relative to this airport, very easy to maintain. The best way to find out generally what the appropriate salary would be to contact the Association of American Airport Executives. And they could give you very quickly a reasonable comparison to all airports and ones that relate to this one. Same thing, I would argue that Hyannis is not like this airport at all.
No, I wasn't suggesting it was.
No, I know
was
you
just-
weren't.
yeah.
I'm just saying, but I think that somebody comes in who doesn't understand the complexities of this business would be quick to jump to a sibling airport by proximity. And I think Tom was probably trying to get that message across, and I support that message. So I would have that individual talk with the appropriate person, I'll give him a name, it's called AAAE,
Right.
American Association of
Right.
Airport Executives. And because they know what all the salaries are. And it may very well be that the 150 is an appropriate salary, or the 130 is an appropriate. Or they may come back and we might look at it and find out that it's on the low end. What we want to do is not overcompensate anybody. What we do want to do is fairly compensate everybody. I particularly think that this is a very difficult job that he has. And I think, if I were to look at it that way, it's probably on the lower, not out of character, but if it were a band, I think he would be at a lower band of comparable airports like this. So I think we shouldn't just say, okay, go look at a couple airports. He ought to, if we're paying him, I'm not talking about Tom, I'm talking
About the consultant.
the consultant, make him do a due diligence so that we have something basis to go on. The third thing, which is kind of an interesting piece, is I don't want health insurance, so I want that. That's money that we don't pay out. I'm assuming that's the $18,000 that we aren't paying.
Right.
I think when he took the job at the salary that was offered, 130, and he said, but I'm not taking that, it's probably a fairly reasonable approach, because we got to pay that money anyway.
Right.
I thought what you did was fairly reasonable. We'll come back. I don't know what the commitment was, but if the commitment was based on your performance, we'll come back with that 8,000. And his performance, from my observation, is good, then some portion or all of that, I think there's an obligation if you made that, you as a
Interacting with them, yeah, interacting
as a
with them,
commission
yeah.
has made that commitment. I think we go back to Libby and said, this is what we told him. What would we, because he can say today he wants medical insurance, and we're going to have to pay that $18,000.
Well, that would be her argument in reverse of the,
But why would we care, as a commission, whether the money is going directly to him? He
We
obviously
wouldn't,
has-
but we would be in a very difficult position if at some point he did come forward and say he wanted medical insurance. I think the likelihood of that is zero,
Oh, no, yeah, that's true. My point is, if he wanted that, we're going to have to pay the $18,000. Now, I would argue that you're not going to pay the 18, you're only going to pay 8,
Right.
because we're giving you 10. But I think it's a fairly, you're going to have to tell Libby and us what the commitment was. You and Art, I guess, were there.
Yep.
And, because, again, a commitment is, whether it was a handshake or a written contract, a commitment is a commitment. And I support
I would
legal,
I would
ethical,
character.
and moral
Yeah.
commitments that this
I don't
commission
think there
made.
was anything in writing, in my recollection. I think the discussion was, we'll try to get the rest for you if you perform well. I don't think there was an absolute commitment, but there was certainly a strong suggestion that that might be forthcoming. And to me, one of the arguments here also is that he doesn't have a contract. And town council has told us airport managers cannot have contracts. Every manager I've run across, now including Bud Brault and Hyannis, has a contract. And Chris Willenborg, who's the director of Mass DOT, said what?
Well, I think they didn't, from an observation without interior knowledge, reading it through the course of events we went through in the community. The previous manager had a bad contract for the city.
Well, and there were other circumstances there. That contract was done actually by the commission, not requested by Mr. Peterson, as I understand it, but when it was done in executive session, and then nobody was told for 2 or 3 months, if my memory serves me. And that was, so that, whatever else happened, and whether it was legal or not, that was just part of the scandal, if you will.
Right, and I know there's a path. This is my point, though. A contract works two ways. A contract is an agreement between the two parties. One of the things I worry about is that if you have an airport manager, and they leave, the turmoil we go through is going to make that $8,000 seem like chump change. So that you want to have a reasoned, fair, honest, legal agreement. Because we are an isolated community, and I don't mean that positively. We don't have people that are going to pop up and grab that job that know how to run it. I know we had somebody who had lots of aviation experience that ran it in the interim for us. Thank you. But your next manager, unless you're going to recreate the previous problems, is going to be an outsider again. And there's always a 50-50 chance that the person we hire to come to this community will not stay, for lots of the reasons that we all know about. So my concern is twofold. Number one is, did we make a commitment? If we did, we should live up to that. Even if the commitment was, I don't know how Tom heard it. So I think we should do that. The second is, I think it would be good for us to have a yearly or bi-yearly contract that keeps him here.
For nothing else, if for no other reason, that we care about him. I mean, I think it demonstrates that we are committed to him. We can demonstrate that in other ways, but having that, something in writing between parties, to me, is something that,
So
so,
just,
anyway, if I may, go ahead.
I was just going to say one more thing.
Okay.
I have a contract with Boeing. Why do I have a contract with Boeing? I've been here a long time. That's because it protects them, not me. I then can't go somewhere else without their approval. That's what they're protecting on it. It's not my protection, because they'll, that's easy. A contract is a two-way street. It protects both parties. But from a city standpoint, boy, I got to tell you, the turmoil we'll go through, I can't imagine it was easy the last time you went through it. You just don't want to do that again.
No, there's no question about that. It is a little different in the private sector, because they don't want you to go work for somebody who competes with them. And we don't have that issue here in the public sector.
That's true. The other piece of it is, they don't want the turmoil of an executive
Right.
leaving without a succession plan.
That's correct.
And we don't have a succession plan, and never will, by the way.
So, anyway, it's, I brought this up because I think it's important that we all discuss it and we decide whether we want to pursue it. You've suggested, Mr. Planzer, a couple of options, which I think are valid. One is to how we approach getting valid salary comparisons, and the other is see what is felt on the other side about the commitment that may or may not have been made, and how strongly it was made. The other thing that I take responsibility for is that, I committed to do performance reviews, and I haven't done them. We set up objectives the first year, and then, we got bogged down in finances and everything else, and it just didn't happen. But I'm going to do something with him now, if I remain as chairman, to get that going again, because I think it's very important. And obviously, any performance review would involve input from all of you and would be discussed in public at the end of the day.
Well, I think all of the employees are feeling so much better, and they really like I'm looking at Ms. Planz's thing there, Mr. Rafter's approach to them, and I think he's honest, or I think they feel he's honest, and I just think that their whole atmosphere or whatever is so much more positive, and I think that's kind of something that we really have to think about.
And I agree. And on the other side of it is that the town manager, I believe, feels that everybody should be in absolute lockstep. But I would hasten to add, and this is what I was going to say a minute ago, as much as we want to try to be good citizens and part of the town, we do have the ability to do other things different things if we feel it's necessary. So why don't we leave this on the table for now, and we'll visit with the compensation consultant next month. I think it's very appropriate to pass these comments on to him, and also I will have a discussion with Tom in terms of his feeling about the commitment.
Just had
Yes,
one
Mr.
comment, or two, which is that I wouldn't see this as a bonus. I would see this as a salary adjustment in line with review of the position and the compensation. And so I think any talk of it as a bonus, we should squash, whether that's a misunderstanding with the town manager or
Right.
anybody else. And then I think that we should revisit.
I did in my email. I'm happy to show you.
No,
my
no,
email.
that's fine.
I
I
did couch it as
adjustment, yeah.
deserved as an adjustment.
And not a one-time, but
Yeah, right.
that it's actually adjustment and not a bonus.
Right.
I tend to agree that we should avoid the bonuses because of the sort of subjectivity and way they could go. But now I think we should just spend a minute on everybody else. And what we have now is, once again, as you talk about the 2% across the board, it really doesn't leave Tom any discretion for performance that increases. And should we as a commission be considering a slot, if you will, of, whether it's 0.5 to 3% or, something along the lines where if he, you know, it gives him the power to incentivize his own employees. So, you know, perhaps one way to do it is the 2% across the board, which addresses the inflationary component, and then approve up to 1% more at Tom's discretion.
Let's wait and talk to him about that.
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
just my, you know,
I
as
would-
we're talking about this, I'd like the
I
idea.
also
that-
think in the context of the next thing that I was going to mention, which is the revision of the employee handbook and this whole compensation study, maybe we should wait until those processes are completed before we,
Didn't I read someplace that there is a longevity increases?
Yes.
yes. It's
That's-
called-
So there is a band. They may call it longevity.
They're not, they're in lockstep, though. They're not.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So an employee who's been 135, whatever the band covers, does get additional money.
I think it's
That's not that-
1.5. Somebody else can answer this better than I can.
I think
David,
5, 10,
maybe?
15, isn't it?
That's,
Yeah, I believe like after 5 years, it's 1%.
10, 15,
15 and 20, something like that, yeah.
it's every 5, I think.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay.
Okay, so we can table
So
this.
is this something we table the whole thing then
No, I
for
think
right
we should,
now,
I
or
think we
do
should
the
go ahead
2%?
and do the 2% and then come back and have this discussion with Tom about anything more. Unfortunately, he was unable to get together, didn't have time to get together what we need for the limited employee handbook discussion we were going to have, which really defines certain rules with respect to overtime, exempt and non-exempt employees and so forth, and also issues with respect to accumulated sick leave. And so we need to have a personnel subcommittee meeting, Ms. Topham, and then we'll have something at the next meeting. All right, so there's a motion on the table to approve the 2% increase for non-union employees, except for anybody who's subject to some other sort of agreement in an early stage of employment.
Well, did Mr. Gasparo want to keep that fluctuating from 1.5 to 3, or is that not something that we could decide today?
I think we need to have that discussion with Tom and have it as part of a.
So we don't lock it out by voting now?
No,
Okay.
we don't lock it out by voting now. This is just
Agreed.
further questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's carried unanimously. All right, thank you. In terms of the project updates and the manager's report, the GA building, we received an interim, quote, interim final pay requisition from
Interim fund.
yeah, well, the final one triggers certain things and timing and so forth. And so we were speculating a little bit about why they were using the interim route, but I think that is a subject which in due course we will have a conversation about in an executive session. Not tonight because we don't know any other details. But at least we finally heard from them, and it's moving along. And the real issue ultimately will be the liquidated damages. The PCOs, for the most part, are minor, and even the ones that are in dispute are relatively minor. It's the question of the liquidated damages. On the control tower charrette, Tom said is very detailed. Based on the findings, the scope of work is being updated, and he wanted to be sure everybody realized that the mobile tower is expected to be on the ramp through the summer of 2015. As you heard from Janine today, an administrative assistant has been hired, and there'll be more details on that. A contract is being developed for the engineering backup, that's not the word I want, engineering standby. We have on a 3-year basis, Jacobs was the prior provider of that service, and they are once again, under this bid process, deemed to be the most advantageous. So in due course, we'll be seeing a contract for that. He's got a couple of things here that we did not discuss today, and I'm not sure. Oh, I think something, ATM in process, appraisal completed, considering combining with town procurement. Do you know anything about that, Jamie? No. And then something about advertising, but he didn't mention that. On the operations, the U.S. Airways began their service last week. I must say, I was there. I came in on JetBlue at around, 1 o'clock, 1:55 on Saturday, and 3 other flights, big flights, arrived at virtually the same time. And it was a bit of a pig's breakfast, but everybody survived and got out of there reasonably whole, and I didn't hear anybody screaming about their bags. I guess we have no control over that. It's the airlines who decide when they're going to come and go, but it was pretty crowded in that baggage claim area there for a while. And as I mentioned earlier, we need a subcommittee meeting. Let's talk about a date that works for you before we leave tonight, okay?
I have my book.
Okay. As you know, the governor will be here for a carbon neutral event on June 27th. Notice is going out to the press tomorrow morning. And there's a list of speakers, fairly long list of speakers, including the governor, the Secretary of Transportation, and so forth. Rick Atherton's on the speakers list, too. As Tom has mentioned before, there's an MD 83 charter due in from the 26th to the 29th. Apparently, it is a wedding party. I don't know whether that's better or worse than a Fagawi group, because I know there are some inns in town that won't take wedding parties. But anyhow, that's apparently what it is. It must be a big wedding.
I just got off the phone with them a few hours ago.
A big wedding. Everything under control? Good. Thanks. The town has a new finance director, Brian Turbett, who has started work, and hopefully we can get him to come to a meeting to meet everybody, or have some other way of getting to know him. I haven't heard about any effort in that, but I'm going to talk to Libby Gibson about it. You got the letter on the Part 139 inspection update, or the packet. Tom said he's never seen a letter quite like that, which I think says a lot for him. And then we have the statistics.
All right, everyone. The operations from May of 2013 to May 2014 is up 3.62%. Unfortunately, year-to-date, it's down 7.16%.
But it's also interesting, I think, if you go back to this schedule, you notice that, it was pretty consistently down in the summer, and then in September it was flat, essentially down, up a little bit in October, and then down consistently across the board until we get to May. So it's not just a seasonal thing. We need to do a little more work and look at what the, if there's any real identifiable.
Well, with the operations being down, the employments being up, it would show that it's the larger aircraft bringing in more people. Less
Well, that's
air-
part of it.
less-
That's part
Less
of it.
flights, but more
But
people.
how does it relate also to the GA traffic and so on?
Our passenger employments from May versus May of last year and this year, it's up 5.57%. Again, the year-to-date, it's down about 0.77%.
In this case, it was in the winter months through April, basically November through April when the numbers were down.
And you folks wanted to see the destination comparisons for each airline. Just finished up the completion of the actual year, so that has the total destinations of each airline on passenger employments.
But we don't know how
Let's
that,
go back to
that we
that
don't know,
for a
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I saw a chart somewhere where the numbers, they're compared year over year, and there was a big jump in JetBlue, was there not? From last
There
year?
was, are you talking about the Boston on this one?
No, I'm talking about
Oh.
the New York, actually. I mean, when JetBlue started in whenever it was,
Oh.
3 years ago, they carried like 8,000 people, and the trend has been.
That would be on the employment sheet, but that includes Boston and JFK.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, wait. Hack to JFK, and then you've got JetBlue on Hack to Boston.
Yeah,
They're separated out.
I think it's,
No, but on a
This one here?
comparison, year-to-year comparison basis.
This one
right.
here.
I'm sorry.
Is it this one here? Where it just has the total amount?
I think there was some mention of it at the master plan
Right.
meeting as
Yeah,
well.
maybe that's where I saw it.
The jet fuel gallons, May compared to May this year, from last year, it's up 37%. For the year, we're up 4.5% on Jet A fuel sales. Gallons sold, actually.
I was talking to Tom about that and said, well, if that was the case, why was the number that we saw last time for the net profit through May 31st relatively small? And his response was that because we don't see some of that month-end money until the next month, because we're on a cash basis, so we don't accrue it. We just take it in when we get it. And when
The avgas gallons sold, May to May of this year, is down about 3%. Year-to-date, it's down about 4.43%. And that's the aviation gasoline gallons. And the freight's down about 15.13% for the month of May.
could you put
Yes,
that back
but-
up,
yeah.
please?
Any idea why, the first 3 months were, and then April was low, and now this is back up? Any thoughts?
No, unless UPS is running more vehicles on the boat.
Yeah, but it can't be worth their while to fly a plane over here and leave it here for the day when they're flying 400 pounds of freight over.
And FedEx is actually flying 2 to 3 flights a day now, and then UPS is actually using a Bondurante right now aircraft, which is bigger than much bigger than the 402. So I'm assuming they're filling it, or unless the 402 is inoperative.
Who, UPS?
Yes.
Has anybody wandered over there to see what they're unloading from it? I mean, it just doesn't compute.
Although they're up in May. That's not where the disparity is.
I'm sorry?
Go back to the chart. Thanks, Dave. That UPS, we don't know where the 15% is when we look at that. Everybody's freight is going up. They don't know, they're up from April quite a bit, while Cape Air is down quite a bit. So my guess is the drop is the Cape Air piece. Without digging into the numbers further, that's where your drop is.
Well, that's only about 5% of the total. The 10,000 drop on 192 is only about 5%. So somewhere else as well.
Well, remember, it's month to month. That 10,000, you're comparing May is down 15%. My point is, without going into the numbers further, it is unusual when everybody else went up from April to May. The total went up quite a bit, but Cape Air dropped.
Right.
So there's something going on there. I just don't know what it is. They're the odd man out in that scenario.
Does that include the mail?
Yes. Most of that is the mail. It's all, me and Jamie are working on that right now, is trying to find out if, the way it looks is it's just the mail, and then we see the aircraft over at the Island Air Freight, but we're not seeing anything on that as far as freight, so.
You see their planes?
See the aircraft over there. Now, whether they're offloading or just loading, we don't know.
Yeah. That's another thing on the to-do list. It would also be helpful to have a year-over-year comparison. Yeah, please.
And then noise complaints, there were 33 for the month of May, which is up 32%. And but yet the year-to-date, it's down 45.37%.
Would anybody be interested in seeing statistics of where the complaints come from?
I think that would be important to see if it's, and to also know how many are from the same person. Personally, that.
Yeah, when it goes up like that, you have to realize that's 10 more complaints. It could be the same person making those 10.
And I
Does
believe-
it negate the noise issue? It just says that it could be.
No, it doesn't, but I think it would be useful to know, because there may be, traditionally, I think, of late, they've been coming from the sort of the people on Fulling Mill Road, and the people in certain people in the Surfside area. But I think it is important to know whether there are a lot of repeats in there, or whether it's,
My guess, Noah's not here, but I bet you Noah can tell you. Right?
I'm sure he probably can. But,
Yeah, I believe Noah keeps a log of that.
yeah.
as well.
I think he does, but I think it would be
Yeah, I've seen
useful.
it before.
I think we should,
seen it.
but I think it should be part of the record. Does that make sense to everybody?
It does to me.
Okay. All right. Are there any subcommittee reports?
We were just waiting on Noah to schedule. I thought we were going to have it for this week, but
he's
haven't
been-
heard from him.
I'm not defending him, but I know he's been very
Yep.
tied up. The back and forth on his visit on Friday have been
I figured that might be the
Unbelievable.
case.
all right. And so we will have something next time from the Personnel Subcommittee as well. Are there any commissioners' comments? Having said my piece earlier, I will say nothing now. All right. Is there public comment at this time? All right. Then I would entertain a motion to go into to executive session, not to return to public session, to review the executive session minutes of August 28th, 2000, these are all 2012 till I say it's 2013, August 28th, September 18th, December 4th, December 11th, February 26th, April, and then, that's 13, February 26th, 13, April 23rd, May 28th, August 27th, September 10th, September 24th, October 8th, October 22nd, November 11th, December 10th, and then in 2014, January 14th, February 11th, February 25th, March 11th, March 25th for possible release, and 4/22 and 5/27 for review and possible release. The ones of substance are still on the subjects that are topics of executive session, namely the GA building, the Gatto property, and labor issues. There are a few in here that we will need to review and release, I think, at the next meeting, which are just pro forma minutes for, minute review meetings. But I don't propose any action at this time.
That's my motion.
No action at this time. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I think we have to take a roll call vote.
Right.
Mr. Planzer, aye.
Aye.
Mrs.
Aye.
Topham, aye. Mrs. Planzer?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Gasparo? Aye. Mr. Drake votes aye. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody says may have their name put next to an aye.
Yes.
So if you make a motion on not taking an action, is that motion in and of itself an action? Think about that.
Talk amongst yourselves.
The tree falls.
The subcommittee meeting.